Hi everyone. Sorry for the delay in getting started. I was having some technical issues, so I finally got them resolved 34 minutes later than I was supposed to start. But thanks for being with me here now, and I appreciate it. So the topic today is going to be um, what to expect when taking the Nurse Aide Theory Certification exam. That's our topic. Again, my name is Vicky Castillo, and I am the CEO and founder of Facets Healthcare Training. We are a CNA test prep. I am a nurse, and I would say that as a CNA instructor for 13 years and a former CNA test evaluator, I think that I have quite a bit of information that might be of interest to you and help you pass the certification test the first time. So before I get started, I want to do a disclaimer. The information that I'm about to present is general information, and each state has specific requirements. So check with your state and test vendor, your instructor, and with your school for specifics. Again, this is general information regarding the certification exam, because as you all know, the certification exam is different in every single state. All right. Let's get started. Okay. All right. So we're going to break this. So remember that you must pass both the nurse aide clinical and the skills or the skills exam, also known as a clinical or skills exam, and the written exam to work as a CNA. You have to pass both. So today I'm going to cover our topic today, what to expect in the nurse aide certification exam. We're going to break that down into 3 points I'm going to cover. How much should you study before taking the certification exam? Where to find the content that you will be tested on, so where you're going to find the content that you will be tested on, and how to answer the test questions. So those are the 3 topics we're going to cover. So let's start with number 1. Let's start with how much you should study before taking the certification exam. So you should study approximately 40 hours before walking into the certification exam. Remember, you want to go into the exam well prepared and with a strong command of the information. Some students may need to study more, so let's talk about those instances in which a student might need to study more. So if an individual passed their course with a C, that individual needs to study more than 40 hours. That's because during the course they did not seem to have a firm or better than average understanding of the content, and so they lack some knowledge, and they need to shore that up by spending extra time studying before walking into the exam. So anybody who has a C, and if you just barely got through with the C, or just a C, you need to spend extra time studying so that you can pass it the first time. Okay, the second reason a person would need to study more than 40 hours is if a person's English is their second language. Typically, you would need to study double or triple the 40 hours, so 80 hours, maybe more. I wouldn't say that it would be beyond undoable to, or I would say it would be recommended to pass the exam. So you'll need to study maybe double or triple, no, 80 hours, maybe 120 hours. So spending quite a bit of time studying if English is a second language. There are several states that do allow an individual to take the written exam in Spanish, and those states are New Mexico, Texas, and Florida. There could be others. If there are, please let me know. I'm happy to hear from you. But those are the ones that I know of for sure. As a side note, though a person can take the certification exam in Spanish, you still cannot use any type of translation dictionary, or electronic translation device, or a translator to take the written exam. So, and that's for any state will not allow you to use any type of translation system or device or translator to take the certification exam, regardless of what language you're going to take it in. Okay. Many states allow any person to take an audio test. Also, I wanted to spend a little bit time talking about that because this means that you can hear the test on an audio device, which could be the computer or an MP3 player or some other electronic format. So if you are finding that you need that additional edge, or that you have specific learning challenges, maybe hearing the test questions is going to be helpful to you. So the test vendor will allow you to have an audio version of the test in addition to watching it on the screen or the written test, whichever. And the audio version only costs around $10 extra, typically about $10 extra, but you do have to request it from your test vendor or from your school before taking the test. So don't arrive at the test and say, I want an audio. No, you have to pre-schedule it, and you have to pay usually about additional $10. So I would highly recommend that, to consider that, because oftentimes hearing the test questions and reading the test questions is very helpful. So another special category that might require additional study time is if a person has a learning disability. They will need to definitely spend additional time studying. Okay, and hopefully, and I've talked about this in other sessions, that hopefully I'd like to think that if a person has a learning disability, the school or the instructors, the CNA program coordinator, has spoken with your test vendor to allow you accommodations to take for test taking. That does not mean you're going to get an exemption or that you're not going to be allowed, you don't have to take the test. Yeah, you'll be allowed to take the test, but usually accommodations maybe mean additional extra time or some other accommodations. So keep that in mind. In addition to discussing how much time you should study, I also wanted to briefly discuss what you should study. And the answer is study your nursing assistant textbooks. I've talked about this as well. Use your nursing assistant textbooks, and preferably study from multiple textbooks, because the test questions are not created just from one textbook, but from multiple textbooks. So the way it usually happens is when test questions are created, developers of test questions use a variety of textbooks to create these test questions, sometimes up to 5, maybe 6 textbooks, nursing assistant textbooks. So when you are studying for your CNA exam, consider using more than one textbook so that you get a variety and a diversity of points of view, not just from one textbook. I would highly recommend that. And also, if you've been studying your textbooks over and over and over again, and you feel like you've already seen this material over and over again, you might be feeling overconfident in terms of you've seen this material and you already know it, but you've just seen the material from that textbook. So consider getting another textbook. They're not that expensive. You can get them at a pretty good price from Amazon, or maybe the school can loan you one, but it is well worth your time maybe getting another textbook, just to gives you some diversity of points of view and some other material to practice on that will most likely be on the test. So each textbook has a different focus, and the amount of content varies. So you want to go into the test having prepared from a variety of materials. You should also study your PowerPoints. That's another source that you should study from, is your PowerPoints provided by your school, notes that you took during the class. You also want to study medical terminology and abbreviations. Okay, that's very important. Some handbooks, for example, I know Headmaster, on the back of their candidate handbook, they have a knowledge test vocabulary that is quite extensive, and I would highly recommend that you take a look at that vocabulary and define those terms, but not just define each of those terms, but also be able to apply them in a scenario situation, because the test is not just going to be about definitions. What does this term mean, or what does that term mean? Oh no, you're going to be tested on scenarios, how to apply that material. And while I'm on the topic of the candidate handbook, I've gone over this before, but your test vendor, each of your test vendors, whether it's Headmaster, Pearson VUE, Prometric, the American Red Cross, and Pearson VUE, Headmaster, American Red Cross, Prometric all have candidate handbooks. I would highly recommend that you take a look at the handbook so that you will be familiar with what is expected. So here's one for Wisconsin. I have another one from Pearson VUE. Again, Arizona candidate handbook. I have the Ohio candidate handbook. This is the Prometric candidate handbook. So whatever your test vendor is, you should have the candidate handbook on hand. They are for free. They're almost always located on your test vendor's website. So be sure to download it, print it out, write all over it. That helps reinforce learning. So you should have that on hand. If you do not have your candidate handbook on hand for your test, from your test vendor, you're going into the test with a considerable disadvantage and very likely not going to pass. Okay, so this handbook is very important. Okay, so the handbook, let's talk about a little bit more about the handbook. In your state's handbook, you will find the content that you will be tested on, such as subject areas, how many questions will be in each subject area, the total number of questions that will be on your test, and the percentage you will need to pass, and the amount of time you will have to take the written test. As a side note also, oftentimes, and I haven't seen it in any test vendor textbook, but you will also have some math questions, oftentimes have math questions on your exam. Now, it's not at the calculus or algebra level, it's not to that level, but you will have some math there. For example, converting regular time to military time, or vice versa, calculating respirations, let's see, what's some other, just a variety of math test questions. So, for example, I want to look at a couple of these handbooks and just give you an example of some of the subject areas that are going to be in the candidate handbook. So, I'm looking at Wisconsin right now, and I'm looking at their candidate handbook for the knowledge test categories. And for the category of safety, they're going to have 8 questions. Again, this is Wisconsin Candidate Handbook by Headmaster. In infection control, they're going to have 7 questions. Personal care category, 8 questions. Mental health category, 4 questions. Care impaired, 8 questions. Resident rights, you're going to have 7 questions. Communication category, you're going to have 5 questions. Data collection, 4 questions. Basic nursing skills, 10 questions. Role and responsibility, 5 questions. Disease process, 4 questions. Aging process and restorative care, 5 questions. So that candidate handbook tells you not only the categories again, but how many. So let's take a look at the one from Pearson VUE. Pearson VUE for your state gives you a breakdown of the test question categories and how many you're going to have, and even the percentage of the total number of questions. So here it's activities of daily living, hygiene, dressing, basic nursing skills. You're going to have 39 questions there. Restorative care, 5 questions. Psychosocial care skills, 6 questions. Role of nurse aide. So quite a bit. So they give you quite a bit of information to help you focus your studying. Of course, you want to go beyond that, but to help you focus your studying. So I want to reinforce that the candidate handbook, you will also find specific materials you will need to bring to testing, such as Aide. I've talked about this in previous video live sessions, but the Aide is very important, because if you do not bring the proper and valid and unexpired, I want to say that word again, unexpired ID to testing, you will not be allowed to test, and you will lose your testing fee. So be sure to read the candidate handbook to be sure what is allowable ID and what is not allowable ID. The candidate handbook also tells you what other materials you will need to bring to testing, such as a pen, a pencil, or something else. Okay, so make sure that you're familiar with it. If a calculator is needed for your written exam, you will be provided one, because you are not allowed to use your own calculator or your cell phone as a calculator. So if you need a calculator, they will provide you one at the test site. They will also provide a scratch paper if you need one as well. Nothing can be taken out of the testing room once you're done. You can't take your scratch paper with you or anything else. Or if they loaned you a pen or a pencil, you can't take that out either. Okay? So again, I want to reinforce no electronic devices such as cell phones or smartwatches will be permitted in the testing room or on your person during the exam. Very important to know. Candidates will take the exam in a testing room with other candidates. Often there has to be a certain distance between each person. So unlike the skills test where there's only one person being tested at a time, in the written exam or the theory exam, whichever one you want to say, I'm just going to say theory exam, you will be in a room with other candidates, but there will be a certain distance between each candidate. Okay, and that's for test security purposes. Before starting the test, the testing group will be given, the entire testing group will be given exam instructions, both verbally and in written format. So before starting the test, the test evaluator or the test proctor will give you written instructions on the test, both verbally and in writing. During the exam, if a person leaves the testing room, they are not allowed back in. Obviously, that's for security purposes. You can't be taking an exam, go out the door, do whatever, and then come back in and resume your exam. No, once you leave the room, you're not allowed back inside the testing room. So be sure to visit the bathroom before starting the exam. It's very uncomfortable to try to take an exam with a full bladder or whatever, and it's just it's uncomfortable and you're not going to be able to focus. So be sure you visit the bathroom before starting the test or going into the testing room. Typically, a person has about 1.5 hours to take the exam. That's not that's a generalized amount, about 90 minutes. I've seen pretty typical for every test vendor is about 90 minutes, but again, check your state to be sure you know how much time you're going to get for the exam. But typically it is about an hour and a half to take the exam. And from my experience, 90 minutes is more than enough time to take the exam for a student that is well prepared and well studied. Okay, the key words are well prepared and well studied. And most of the time, what I've noticed is very common that students finish up in about 40 minutes. 45 minutes. So the fact that a student has an hour and a half to take an exam, but they can usually finish up and pass in 40 minutes, that's a good sign. So hour and a half is usually a good enough time, is plenty of time. Okay. So the handbook explains how many times a person is allowed to take the written and the skills exam. Okay, you have a limited number of attempts, and a limited number of attempts, most likely within a certain time frame. So some states limit the number of times a person can take an exam. Some states do not, but almost every state has a limited time frame from which you can take it. Usually it's 1 to 2 years. So if a person has not passed their certification exam within 1 or 2 years from finishing up their course, then they have to retake the course again before they're allowed to take any part of the exam again. So again, check with your state if you have unlimited number of attempts within a certain period, or you can only take a certain number of attempts within a certain period. So check with your state and see what those requirements are. Okay. All right. So the next category is so our third category is how to answer the exam questions. How to answer the exam questions. Well, I want to start out first and foremost that the exam questions will be all multiple choice. Okay, they'll be all multiple choice. You're not likely going to have true, false, or fill in the blank. I haven't seen that before. If I'm not correct, please let me know. But that's typically the case. It's their multiple choice. Most states have a maximum of about 100 questions. Some of them are 75, 78, maybe 80, but I've never seen a state that has more than 100 questions. So all multiple choice, less than 100 questions. And here's some test taking strategies. And so read the questions carefully. Remember, you have plenty of time. So read the questions carefully. Read the question again if you need to, and then take a look at your answers. Usually about 2 answers are almost always obviously wrong. Okay, so you can eliminate those. Then you have about two that you need to decide which one is the best answer. So take again, if you need to read the question a third time, read it again. That's perfectly fine. If you're using an audio, you can rewind the audio so you can listen to the question multiple times. That's the beauty of the audio. You have the pause, rewind option on that audio. I don't know if you have fast forward. I don't think so, but I know that you do have a pause and rewind on if you're listening to your test questions via audio. So multiple choice, read your questions read the question multiple times if you need to. Don't be in a hurry, and then uh, eliminate the answers that are obviously wrong. And then some other tips as well. If there's an option on your test question that it is notify the nurse or tell the nurse, it is very often that is the answer. Okay, very often that is the answer. Not always, but very often it is the answer. So again, if the one of the choices is notify the nurse or go advise their nurse or tell the nurse, that's often the answer. Okay. The other issue is also is if you have math, verify your math calculations, verify those, and let's see, what are some other test taking strategies that I have written down here for you? Take your time, okay? And then watch your time as well. You don't want to go so slow that it's, you've already used up an hour and a half and you've only gotten to half of your questions, so you just have a few minutes left to do half of the test. You don't want to go so slow as to that as well. You don't. You want to pace yourself well, but keep track of your time. And there's almost always a clock in the room. Remember that the test will be proctored, and the proctor will be in the room with the test takers, but you will not be allowed to ask the proctor any questions. They will not answer any questions for you. And the other thing also is that I see too often is students changing answers. Only change an answer if you're absolutely sure that you made a mistake answering the first time, and that you're absolutely sure that the answer you're going to change it to is going to be the right answer. Otherwise, your first instinct is almost always right. Okay? Once you hand in your test to the proctor or you submit, sometimes you get your answers right away and you know whether you well, let me back up. Once you submit your test, sometimes you will get your results right away and sometimes not. So it just depends on your state. So sometimes you'll know right away that whether you pass the exam or not, and sometimes you have to wait several days before your test is scored and you get your answers. So check with your state vendor or your state specifics. Once you pass both the theory test and the skills test, then the next step is to get registered on your state registry. And that's a whole new topic that I'm going to discuss at another time. All right, that pretty much wraps it up. I want to just share some last minute points here. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm looking to increase my subscribers to YouTube. Watch my Facets Facebook events for upcoming Facets test prep sessions. So I'm going to keep having these live sessions. Hopefully I won't have so many technology issues, but please keep watching for that. And if you're interested in our monthly newsletter, please let us know by messaging us. We send out a monthly, and now we started to send them twice a month because we have so much information and content that we're developing. We want to keep you all posted on what we are doing. So send us an email letting us know that you want to be on our newsletter. We're also looking for testimonials for our website. We'd love to have more testimonials. So if you are a Facets success, which I believe most are. I think we have a very high success rate, and we guarantee it as well. We have a guarantee on our website, so take a look at that. So if you are a Facet success and you would like to give us a testimonial with a picture, we'd love to put your testimonial and your photo on our website, and so please reach out to us. And then you can now book on Facebook appointments. On the Facebook appointments tab to speak with me or my team about any of our content or any questions that you might have. We're here available for you. You can also, of course, get a hold of us on our Facets website and through the contact us. So there's many ways to get a hold of us. All right, I think that's it for now. It's been wonderful being with you, and we look forward to our next session together where I cover another topic. You have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.